Preparing the Pine Belt. WDAM 7 on your side.
Hello and welcome to Preparing the Pine Belt. I'm WDAM's Chief Meteorologist Nick Lilia. Hurricane season continues until November 30th, and as we move through summer, it's important to check weather forecasts regularly and make certain you're prepared if a tropical storm or a hurricane is forecast to hit the Gulf Coast. Now, during the next 30 minutes, you'll learn all about tropical storms, hurricanes, and what to do if one is forecast to make landfall near you. And helping out along the way, veteran forecaster Rex Thompson. He's been here for a minute or two now in his
minute or two.
15th year.
Just in the Pine Belt area, forecasting hurricanes and other various tropical storms and all kinds of weather.
I was going to say, you've been through your fair share of some rough weather.
Yes, I have. And of course, I'm very honored to have the trust of the Pine Belt. And I know that we've all been through some pretty rough weather together. And of course, our job is helping you stay safe during the storm.
That's right. Our team is here every day to offer accurate forecasts to protect you and your family during every severe weather event. We do get a lot of questions down here, though, about how we put together a forecast, why we pay certain attention to certain clouds, or why we pay more attention to other weather patterns. Well, accurately forecasting the weather for the Pine Belt takes a lot of time, determination, patience.
Sometimes just pure luck.
Yeah, right. And like any other job, all the tools make all the difference.
Absolutely. Analyzing models and data is a huge part of this job, and of course, we're lucky to have the tools that we do to get the job done.
We look at more than a dozen computer weather models here in the Pine Belt Precision Weather Center to accurately predict the ever-changing weather conditions across the area. What you're looking at right now is the RPM, the Rapid Precision Mesoscale Model. It's what powers our Futurecast. It looks a little different to us down here in the station than it does to you at home, but this is what we look at, especially into the tropics. Here's your Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean, and the Atlantic. It looks a little different for us than it does for you at home. There's the high-resolution rapid refresh model. Now, that's the HRR for sure. That basically just looks at the United States and then into the Gulf of Mexico. There's the North American model. That'll look into the Gulf of Mexico as well, but it's mainly for just the regular United States. By the way, this is a skew T map. This is a measure of temperature and dew point, kind of graphically, from the surface all the way up into the upper levels of the atmosphere. And we'll look at these down here when we're predicting a lot of severe weather that we have. There's the Global Forecast Systems model. That looks at almost the entire globe, but that'll focus on the greater lower 48 as well as the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Caribbean. There's also the European model. Now, this looks right now at the southeast, the Atlantic, the Gulf of Mexico. The Euro actually ends up looking at the entire globe and does a pretty good job, too. And here's the GFS as it looks out into the Atlantic Ocean. Notice at this time, we do have a lot of winds. They're going all in the same direction. Not much happening out there in the Atlantic quite yet. But what does it take to get any kind of tropical development? Well, first and foremost, it takes warm water. Beyond that, you need to have an area of low pressure down at the surface. On top of that, both literally and figuratively, you need an upper level area of high pressure. Let's zoom in. We'll take kind of a closer peek here, specifically in the Gulf of Mexico. Here's your area of surface low pressure as an example, your high pressure aloft up there in the atmosphere. The low pressure at the surface is a great job of promoting the development of showers and thunderstorms. And as it gets a little better organized and the thunderstorms get a little more numerous, you end up with all of this warm air that's lifting up to create these showers and thunderstorms. Well, if there's no wind shear and you do have that area of high pressure aloft, that'll direct a lot of it out and away from that center of circulation. And what that does is it creates a conveyor belt of warm air here getting pulled out, and you get a little rain band set up in here, and you also end up with the eye of the storm if that tropical storm does develop into a hurricane and become strong enough, because you're directing all of that air out and away from the center of the storm. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but generally speaking, that is a big piece of the puzzle. And you can see it here. Tropical Storm Allison, you've got the counterclockwise rotation, and you've got the banding of the rain getting wrapped in here. There's also Hurricane Wilma, and this one looks a little better developed. Notice that you're almost getting completely wrapped around that area of surface low pressure. You've got that with Hurricane Lily here, but you don't have an eye in there. And then we'll take a look at Tropical Storm Lee. This one has a lot of dry air getting pulled into the western side. Oftentimes when you see these tropical storms develop early in the year, they have one side that is kind of missing because they're pulling in dry air because it isn't quite set up yet for tropical development. Speaking of origins and where things develop, in June it's basically the Gulf of Mexico and the Northwest Caribbean. As we move into July, we'll start to see development out into the Atlantic Ocean and the rest of the Caribbean, almost all the way out to the Greater and Lesser Antilles. By the time you get into August, you're into the open waters of the Atlantic, and this all has to do with warming those ocean waters. That's that warm water that we were talking about. And then by the time you get to September, all the way out to the coast of Africa, the peak being at the beginning of September of the hurricane season. By the time you get into October, that does start to sneak back a little bit closer, a lot like we saw in August. And by the time you get into November, we're talking about just the Gulf of Mexico and just off into the Atlantic. But speaking of tropical systems, there are three different kinds. You've got your tropical depression, tropical storm, and your hurricane. We'll start with the tropical depression and what that is. That is any storm developed around a central area of low pressure. We're not associated with a frontal boundary at all. They're discrete. They're out there on their own. They're actually the most common type of tropical system that you have because every single tropical storm and hurricane that you've ever heard of started as a tropical depression. Tropical storms are next, and these have winds anywhere between 39 and 73 miles per hour. Now, tropical storms are finally given a name, and these systems also cause a lot of flooding rains, and you end up with isolated tornadoes as well. So while the wind is something that we do pay close attention to, oftentimes when you get a tropical storm to come ashore, we're as concerned with flooding and the possibility of those isolated tornadoes. Now, once you get into the hurricanes, that's when things get a little more intense. You've got winds in excess of 74 miles an hour. Hurricanes can have that eye that we were talking about. In fact, you can see it in the background of the graphic there. They come with the strong winds, the flooding rains, the storm surge, which is a very isolated area of increased sea level. That's basically down along the coast, and they do also carry with them the possibility for isolated tornadoes. Now, there are different categories when you're talking about hurricanes. Category 1, winds 74 to 95 miles an hour. You're going to have some damage. Oftentimes you're talking about roof damage, siding damage, fences getting blown over, and tree limbs getting taken off of trees. Category 2, winds between 96 and 110. This damage is extensive. You're talking about roofs getting blown off in places, poorly built structures getting blown over, trees getting blown over, fences getting destroyed. By the time you talk about a Category 3, 111 to 129 mile an hour winds, that's devastating damage. You're talking about being without power for a couple of weeks, roofs getting destroyed or lifted off of buildings, poorly built structures completely flattened, and again, roads almost impassable. By the time you get to Category 4 and Category 5, you're talking about catastrophic damage. This is being without power for weeks, perhaps months. In the case of a Category 5, you're talking about perhaps an area being uninhabitable for up to a month or two. Rex?
Thanks, Nick. But we do not forecast alone. Thanks to technology, we use the National Weather Service chat to work with 3 local National Weather Service offices to get the latest information to you and as fast as possible. And leading up to an event, it offers a couple of extra sets of eyes on the forecast office. And those local National Weather Service offices work with the National Hurricane Center, and the National Hurricane Center has people who actually fly into the hurricane to see how strong it's actually getting. Megan Hodge got that chance to tag along for a ride.
When we hear a hurricane is headed our way, we board up the windows and gather food and water and sometimes evacuate altogether. But the men and women of the 53rd Weather Recon Squadron of the Air Force Reserves,
winds were 55 to 60 knots, the pressure was 995 millibars.
They do the exact opposite.
Convection is on the east side, the southeast is the strongest.
Because they are, after all, the hurricane hunters.
So that's our job, and that's what we're going to do today.
But let's rewind a bit. There's a few things to know before the adventure begins.
In the couple hours prior to stepping out to the airplane, we will be looking at the data from the Hurricane Center website to see what they're interested in. We'll be looking at the latest satellite pictures and radar, so we can kind of guess what's coming out.
And we're going to come out, we'll make that, fly that triangle, which is called the alpha pattern. And we'll do that 4 times. And every time we come, the storm will have moved on its predicted path, hopefully. So what we're going to do is kind of drop a crumb and establish a trail of where the storm is going.
The cone of uncertainty, the path of the storm, the hurricane track, whatever you call it, it wouldn't exist without the data that the hurricane hunters gather.
Looking at it for a few things in the eye itself as we fix it. As we drop a sun, it's going to tell us temperature, humidity, pressure, and winds aloft. That's basically all of the ingredients as it's falling down through the atmosphere. Every 10 feet, it's going to take that snapshot until it hits the water. All of this information that we're going to take out of the storm today, we're going to send that to the National Hurricane Center in Miami. They're going to take all of that information and they're going to plug it into the models that you see on TV.
With the flight plan determined, the crew briefed, and the WC-130J ready to go, the hurricane hunters are cleared for takeoff.
Or in this case today, maybe we'll see a hurricane by the time we get out there.
How the ride's going to be today, I can't really make any promises to you. It could be pretty smooth, it could be rough.
Well, I can't say they didn't warn me. For 7 on Your Side, I'm Megan Hodge.
When we come back, we'll take a look at how you can protect yourself if a hurricane is coming.
But first, how many hurricanes, on average, strike the U.S. every year? The answer when we come back. And before the break, we asked how many hurricanes hit the U.S. every year. The answer might surprise you. Just 1 to 2 every single year hit the U.S.
Wow. When bad weather strikes, we have a lot of tools to keep you safe. Our live wire system from WSI lets us alert you with on-screen information about advisories, watches, and warnings without ever breaking into your favorite shows. If a weather advisory or watch warning is issued, a map of the Pine Belt with the radar will appear in the lower left corner of your television. It will also switch between a live radar loop and a shaded polygon of the affected areas. Text with information about the current weather situation will also scroll across the screen, and this will let you know what is happening and which counties or towns will be affected. The only time we will cut into a show already in progress is during a tornado warning, hurricane warning, or a flash flood emergency, and at that point it is our responsibility to warn you with more than just a picture and some text that your life could be in danger.
And for hurricane season, learning the difference between a watch and a warning and what they mean could save your life. A tropical storm watch means that tropical storm conditions with winds between 39 and 73 miles per hour will be possible in the area within the next 48 hours. Now, a hurricane watch is issued for a hurricane with winds greater than 74 miles per hour, but will be issued 48 hours before the start of tropical storm force winds. Now, the National Hurricane Center does this so that you have enough time to prepare for the roughest part of the storm. A tropical storm warning or a hurricane warning will be issued when conditions for each type of storm are expected in that area, and each warning will be issued 36 hours before the onset of tropical storm force winds.
Now, with the hurricane season rolling, right now is the time to make a plan so you aren't caught off guard if a tropical system moves this direction.
Yeah, it's very important.
Doing the right things right now can mean everything later this summer. Here are a few tips to prepare your family for a tropical system, determine an evacuation route, and if you have any pets, try to find hotels along the way that are pet friendly. And if you don't think you'll evacuate, check on your emergency supplies, make sure you have batteries, flashlights, medicines, and insurance documents in a safe, dry place. Now, stock up on non-perishable foods and water. Make sure you have a gallon of water per person per day for up to 2 weeks, very important. And if you have a home, trim trees, shrubs, and clear out your gutters and downspouts, and make sure your NOAA weather radio is still functioning with plenty of fresh batteries.
Yeah, and make sure it's tuned to the right channel as well. And if a tropical system is